Hello, my name is Andrew Taylor, and I'll be doing my speech today over should violent criminals receive mandatory prison sentences. So, I'll be demonstrating why criminals should receive mandatory prison sentences for the crimes they have committed. I'm going to start with a quote from Aristotle. The generality of men are naturally apt to be swayed by fear rather than reverence, and to refrain from evil rather because of the punishment that it brings than because of its own foolishness. For the most part, all people would say that criminals belong somewhere separate from law abiding citizens. The violent crimes they have committed should have mandatory sentences that fit the crime. So I chose this topic because many criminals tend to get a slap on the wrist if they are first time offenders. The punishment, a lot of times, does not fit the crime. And the sources today I'll be using will be from World Wide Web or Internet. So we're going to speak on why violent criminals should receive prison sentences, what would be appropriate sentences for offenders, and how does it help the community better. So let's jump right into it. Why violent criminals should receive prison sentences. Number one, they become a danger to society. The person that has demonstrated that they are not fit to be in society, they have shown that based off of the actions that they have committed, which are during violent crimes. So, examples would be Robert Lee Yates, who pleads guilty to murder after killing 13 women in Spokane, Washington, between the years of 1996 and 1998. Another person would be Chester Turner, who was convicted of killing 14 people in Los Angeles in the 80s and the 90s. There's also those that are mentally unstable. Many acts of violence or crimes that have been committed are by individuals that are mentally unstable or incapable to be left alone by themselves in society. Whether there are crimes violently that are committed to others or themselves, it shows that many criminals are incapable of doing harm. They are capable of doing harm to individuals with the acceptance of committing the acts. So no violent act of harm towards an individual or individuals should go unpunished. So now that we've dealt with why, which is that they are a danger to society, let's consider what is an appropriate sentence for violent offenders. So there are different categories of sentencing that the judicial process has, which starts with the most heinous of offenses, and then it goes from Class A felonies all the way down to Class B, Class C, and D. Then they have misdemeanors. But we're just going to cover a couple of those today. So, Class A felony carries with it a 10-year minimum sentence. A couple of examples of those are aggravated sexual assault of a minor, which carries with it a max of 25 years plus. Murder, which is 25 years minimum, which also can max itself up to 60 years, or it can exceed above that. Felony murder, which is a minimum of 25, which can max itself out to 60 years as well. I think I made a correction with the Class A felonies carries with it a minimum of 25 years. Then you go to Class B felonies, which is just a step below Class A, but some of the felonies of Class B are considered A felonies as well. So it's based on the conviction rate or conviction that the judges offer for those violent offenders. So you have injury or risk to a minor, which is 5 years minimum with a 20-year max. Manslaughter first degree with a firearm is 5 years minimum with a 40-year max. Assault first degree, which is 5 years if causes injury, increases up to 20 years max. Each crime that is committed carries with it a sentence. Those that have committed violent offenses have harsher sentences, from life in prison without possibility of parole, including the death penalty. The max prison sentence that an offender can receive is execution or life in prison. So let's move on down to, does sentencing help the community? Different outlooks that we can pinpoint are, how do we treat violence or criminal violence as a public health issue. So those that have mental health issues should be sent for evaluation to help them cope with their issues. So if you find that somebody is being out of the ordinary or doing things out of the ordinary, we should be able to report those individuals to where they can get mental health treatment, and that way that can reduce the crime rate, or those that have committed violent acts, they can still go for mental health evaluations, but also will have to complete the sentence that they have been issued. That also includes funding mental health, which can reduce the amount of unexpected crimes and even suicides. We also can focus on gun control, which is giving a harsher punishment for individuals that use guns in violent crimes, or just have common sense gun laws for everybody, to the point where those guns stay out of the hands of the individuals that are trying to do harm to other civilians. The more proactive that we are as citizens, that we police ourselves and others, our communities will come better and be safer for us. Those that break those laws of committing violent crimes will be sentenced to harsh punishments, which will protect our citizens. So we've discussed all this information on why violent criminals should have mandatory sentencing. And for me, I would say in conclusion that sentencing properly for violent offenders should be something that's necessary for that individual, to make an example of him, and also to give families closure that have been affected by those individuals or individual. So we have demonstrated why violent criminals should receive mandatory prison sentences for their crimes they've committed. I will close with a quote from Marcus D. Sade, which he was a inmate in prison, which he wrote this quote to his wife, and it states, "As punishment that does not correct, that can merely rouse rebellion in whoever has to endure it, is a piece of gracious infamy, which makes those who impose it more guilty in the eyes of humanity. Good sense and reason, nay 100 times more guilty than the victim on whom the punishment is inflicted." So those that have committed acts of violence, I agree that they should have harsh punishment and they should have mandatory sentencing, because it keeps us all safe, and it also gives them the appropriate punishment for their actions, because they should not go unpunished for those heinous actions. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed the speech.